This week, we'll discuss portfolios as an assessment tool, and this will wrap up our discussion of informal assessment too. But let's begin with the definition. Portfolios are a purposeful and organized collection of children's work for the purpose of assessment. Portfolios contain evidence of child's development, efforts, progress, and achievements. Portfolios provide teachers and parents with a holistic understanding of a child's capabilities and knowledge. Portfolios are a great tool for understanding the whole child and containing all that information in just one location. With portfolios, information is collected from many different sources, and many different individuals can be involved in the process, providing a more accurate picture of a child. Children can have the opportunity to be an active participant in the portfolio process too. They can make decisions about what to include and experience a sense of pride when they look over their work. Teachers can share actual evidence of children's development and meeting of standards. Teachers and families can see the progress a child has made over time. Teachers can see the progress children in a class have made over time, too. Teachers can use this information to improve teaching and support learning. Portfolios can foster continuous reflection and a richer and deeper communication among members of the entire learning community. Portfolios also document interests, pinpoint potential areas of need, and describe how life experience may be affecting a child's growth and development. Portfolios can demonstrate results of the individualized plans also with children who have disabilities. So the important piece about portfolios is that they give you a very holistic view of the child because everything can be collected in one area. And we'll be discussing those different types of things that we can collect for portfolios throughout this presentation. If you decide to use a portfolio system in your classroom, one of the first steps will be to define a purpose for the portfolios that you're going to use. Decisions about what items to place in the portfolio should be based on that purpose. And without a purpose, a portfolio is really just a folder of children's work. So some questions to ask yourself are you interested in collecting information about development? Are you more concerned about individual goals for each child? Do you plan to use the information for instructional planning? According to Murphy and Smith, portfolios can be intended to motivate students, to promote learning through reflection and self-assessment, and to be used in evaluations of students' thinking and writing processes. The portfolio can be used to make sense of children's work, to communicate about their work, and to relate the work to a larger context. Another thing to consider when using portfolios is, will the children be involved in choosing items to preserve so that they can analyze their work themselves? When selecting items for their portfolios, children can have opportunities to reflect on and assess their own learning. Portfolios can be a powerful learning tool when used this way. How will portfolios be integrated into your overall assessment system? Consider how a variety of assessment strategies might support each other in your assessment system, with portfolios being one of those items. There are a lot of different types of portfolios, and we'll be looking at those briefly here. A working portfolio is a collection of examples of students' work for future evaluation, so it's only used for a temporary period of time. An evaluative portfolio is used for both formative and summative assessment. It evaluates development and allows for planning. A showcase portfolio exhibits the child's best work and allows them to share accomplishments. An archival portfolio are those that follow a student from year to year and it shows their growth and development over time. So one of the things that you'll need to do if you're going to use portfolios in your classroom is decide which type or combination of types of portfolios that you want to use. Another decision you'll have to make about is how your portfolios will be organized. Will you organize them by developmental areas, by IEP goals, by the type of materials included, or by themes and projects? Other questions to ask yourself is, will you have a content checklist in the front of the portfolio, sort of a table of contents to tell whoever's viewing the portfolio what's contained in there? What kind of items will you make sure make it into the portfolio? We'll be talking about some of those items next. And how will you include parents in making contribution to portfolio contents? Will you include photos, video, and audio? And how will you do that? An important point to remember is to date all the materials that go into a portfolio. That way, you'll be able to organize it sequentially. In early childhood education, portfolios should contain a statement of purpose and a wide variety of work samples, including successive drafts of work on particular projects. So let's say the children are studying worms and they're making drawings of worms throughout that project. You want to include their various drawings that show a growth of understanding of the worms and the different part of worms and how they work in their environment. Also, it must be possible to divide the portfolio into sections. These sections of the portfolio will be determined by your purpose for the portfolio. In the example here, the portfolio is divided into 6 sections, and each section will begin at a labeled divider that has been added to a binder. The first page of each section will be a sheet that provides descriptors that characterize that particular section. So by descriptors, I mean if you're talking about the creative section, you'll want to maybe make a description of what do we mean by creative and what kind of items will be in that area of the creativity part. Will it just be artwork, or are you looking for other problem-solving, creative thinking type items too? Another consideration is how you pay for the binder or the other filing system that you use for portfolios. Will you ask the parents to provide these materials? Will the center provide them? Or will you use classroom money to purchase the supplies? The portfolio system you choose should be easily accessible to teachers, children, and parents. To facilitate ease of use, have a place in your room to put forms, markers, hole punchers, and any other supplies you're going to need to add items to the portfolios quickly. Try not to let items for the portfolio pile up. Add them to the portfolio weekly or daily so maintaining them doesn't become overwhelming. You'll need to decide where the portfolios will be in the classroom. Will they be by the door so parents and children can review them daily? The portfolio should take up as little space as possible, but be large enough to contain all of the material that you're going to need to include throughout the year. So there's a lot of considerations in organizing portfolios. And if you can do that ahead of time, it's going to save you some pain. Well, now let's talk about some things to include in a portfolio. Portfolios are started at the beginning of the year, and you should try to collect at least 3 samples of each type of documentation during the year. So let's talk about some of the items you might collect for the portfolios. One thing to include in a portfolios are samples of children's work. These might be drawings, paintings, or collages, letter or number and writing samples, graphs of science and math experiments. Select these items or allow the children to select them based on their important or exemplary work. You might want to consider including work samples that show the children's progress over time, such as we discussed with the worm drawings. You might include handwriting samples or understanding of a study during project work that show growth over time. Sometimes children's work and activities can't be easily placed in a portfolio. When that happens, document by taking a photograph. Some things you might photograph are three-dimensional artwork, outdoor experiences, performance activities, or block and manipulative buildings. Be sure to put a description of the item with the photo and label with the children's age and date. Keep your camera handy so that you can photograph the children in those brief moments of exciting activities, such as an elaborate block structure or the first time on a balance beam. Another thing to collect are written records. Written records can include many different things. For example, maybe a log of the books you read with the child at school, or notes and comments by children about their work. You'll want to include descriptions of artwork recorded onto paper that are put with drawings and paintings, but maybe not on the actual paper. Be respectful of the children's work and ask them first before you add labels or descriptions to it. You might consider including interviews with children about an activity or topic they're working on. Dictations from children are an excellent source for demonstrating and understanding a children's thinking. For example, children's personal reactions to school experiences or field experiences, stories children make up, journal dictations of what happened at school or home, and their thoughts and ideas about projects in the classroom are all wonderful entries for a portfolio. You might also want to include your systematic observations, such as anecdotal notes and running records. The portfolio can be a great place to organize that information that you collect about children. However, you'll have to consider the confidentiality piece here. You might want to keep these anecdotal notes and running records in another area, or you might want to keep them in the portfolio, but maybe not have the portfolio as readily available out in the classroom just for anyone to pick up. So that's a consideration when you're thinking about including your systematic observations. But it is a really nice way to include everything in a portfolio when you have those as well. If parents are going to see those regularly, you want to consider that your observations are really written in a very positive and looking at more of a strength-based collection of notes. Along with systematic observations, you might also want to include summary inventory of assessments. You might consider, are you going to include your checklist, rating scales, tally sheets, again, running records, anecdotal notes in the portfolio? And just remember those confidentiality considerations. Talk it over with your staff and your team and decide what needs to be kept in the portfolio and maybe what should be kept in a locked file drawer instead. Again, it kind of all relates back to the purpose of your portfolio. Involving children in the portfolio process can add an exciting and interesting perspective to the portfolio. But if you do this, there's a few things to keep in mind. First, tell the children about the portfolios and the reasons for using them. You could say, this is your special book where we can save some of the most important work you do here at school. Some things I will add to your book, but you can choose important things like drawings or writings to add too. We'll keep your book on the shelf by the door so you can look at it and show it to your mommy and daddy when they come. A second consideration is to spend time looking at the portfolio with individual children throughout the year and talk to them about their work. As you share the portfolios together, you can involve the children in setting goals and collecting data. As you review the portfolio materials with the children, talk to them about what they remember, what were they learning, and what they might want to know more about. Ask them, is this something you want to put in your portfolio? And soon you'll find that they are initiating the process of adding important materials to the portfolios. Remember to always ask them about their work and document that conversation. along with their selection. Finally, children can also be involved in evaluating the portfolio. When you review the portfolio with them, ask, what did you like best? What did you learn? Is there something you would like to learn more about? Is there something you want to write about in your portfolio to explain better what was going on in this picture? I think involving children in the portfolio process can be really fun and exciting and add just a really interesting dimension to their learning process. There are some other important considerations that go into using portfolios in the classroom. One is, and we've talked about this already, is how will you maintain confidentiality? Will the portfolios be out on a shelf for children and parents to look at? Will they be locked up at night? How will you stress confidentiality with the parents if they are out on the bookshelves? Is there sensitive information that will not be kept in portfolios due to confidentiality? Another consideration is how will you introduce the portfolios to parents? In a letter, at conferences, at an open house? Make sure that all parents understand the portfolio process in your classroom. Will you encourage parents to contribute to the portfolios, or will this be content that's only from school? How will you encourage the entire team at your school to help with contributions to the children's portfolios? Be sure to schedule regular meetings with team members and teachers to discuss observations, check for subjectivity or bias, and summarize a child's growth and change. What should be kept and what should be given to parents is another consideration. Will you make copies of the children's work to keep in the portfolios and send the original home? Or do you want the authenticity of the original work in the portfolios? And finally, another consideration is, will portfolios be passed on to the child's next teacher, or will they be sent home at the end of each program year? Okay, so many considerations to take into account when you use portfolios. And I hope you'll try using them in your classroom. They're really wonderful to have. And as we wrap up our discussion of informal assessments, you should have a fairly good understanding of the variety of tools that exist from which you can design a comprehensive observation system to collect fair and accurate information from the children in your care. These all fall under the broad category of observational tools, but each one is unique and serves a specific purpose. One of your important roles as an educator is to understand each of these tools and to be able to choose between them for individual assessment purposes. I hope you feel like you have a good understanding, or at least a beginning understanding, of each one of these tools. Now let's also take a minute to go back and review what it means to have a system of assessment and use assessment data for intentional planning, keeping in mind that assessment and the tools you choose are an essential part of the curriculum planning process. So let's review our diagram here once again. You can see in the first blue circle that assessing what's happening in the classroom is the very first step to curriculum planning. You're trying to answer the question, what happened? And we do this through all these different assessment tools that we've been discussing. Observations, work samples, photos, videos, performance, rating scales, checklists. All of these items will help you to assess. And you'll have to pick and choose when you're going to use a particular tool and how you're going to use it. Maybe some tools you'll use all the time, and others you'll reserve for just on special occasions when you need to collect a particular type of data on a child. The next step, in the next blue circle, is to interpret that data. What is interesting about what happened and what you observed? What is meaningful? You might ask, what standard does it meet? Have you seen growth in this child? And it also helps you understand, do you need to cover some topics more or differently? Or is it time to move on and provide other materials? Do you need to have a variety of materials in your classroom because the children are at all kinds of different areas of growth and development? You might also ask yourself, what did you see that the children are interested in? Because if you plan for different things that children are interested in and bring materials into your classroom based on that, children are going to be a lot more motivated to learn. So this is all part of your interpretation of the assessment data. It's a separate step to the process of intentional planning. We don't want to just collect the data, but we also want to look at it and interpret it also. And then the next step is to plan your curriculum based on what you found when you did your observations and interpretations. And so what you're doing here is planning for the next experiences. What can you do with this new understanding of the children in your classroom to help support children's growth and development? Would you change the environment? Are there going to be changes in the materials that you bring into the classroom? Or will you provide new or different or repeat different activities that you've already had? Once you implement those lessons, then the process starts over again with assessment, interpretation, and planning. And so this is a cycle that goes on throughout the year. And it's really important to understand that connection between assessment and curriculum planning. So I hope you have a really good feeling for it. If not, ask questions, review it in your textbook, and review some of the slides here so that you'll have a better understanding of it. When it comes to writing lesson plans, this is the kind of thing that we're going to be looking for. Finding out if your standards and your objectives and your assessment all line up together.